In this presentation, we are going to look at the rivalry between the Saifawa Dynasty and the Bulala in the KanemBorno Empire. The rivalry between the Saifawa Dynasty and the Bulala in the KanemBorno Empire. The KanemBorno Empire was a very strong political unit that was established in parts of what is regarded as West Africa and some parts of Central Africa. In fact, the territories of the KanemBorno Empire can be found in present-day Nigeria, some parts of Nigeria, some parts of Niger Republic, some parts of Chad Republic, and some parts of Cameroon Republic. The empire was established in two ways, or in two phases. The first being the Kanem part of the empire, while the second was the Borno part of the empire. And the establishment of the empire was traceable to the Kanuri people. The empire was very influential and was highly practical during the booming period of the trans-Saharan trade. During the booming period of the trans-Saharan trade. But there were issues which later resulted in the collapse of the first phase of the empire, which was the Kanem part of the empire. Well, with the collapse of the first phase of the empire, there were some developments that led to the establishment of the second phase of the empire. Well, the empire was ruled by the Saifawa Dynasty, but the Saifawa Dynasty for over 1,000 years. The Saifawa Dynasty ruled the empire for over 1,000 years. The lineage or the Saifawa Dynasty was traceable to Saif ibn D. Yazan. But there are some locals that played very important role in the establishment and the sustenance of the influence of the Saifawa Dynasty. And a very important group that played a role was the Magumi group, the Magumi people. The Magumi people played a very important role in strengthening the influence of the Saifawa Dynasty. Maybe we have to discuss the roles the Magumi played in the next, in another edition. But the first phase of the empire, which was Kanem, was very strong and witnessed some powerful kings. One of them was Maidunama I. The title of a king in the empire was Maidunama I and then Maidunama II. We have two prominent kings that ruled in the first phase, Kanem phase of the empire. After the death of Maidunama II, Maidunama II can as well be called Maidunama Dibalemi. After the death of Maidunama II, the empire witnessed the rule of very weak kings. And although these kings were not all weak, but there were some developments that affected the empire. One major development that seriously affected the empire was internal political struggles. Internal political struggles within the Saifawa Dynasty mainly. The Saifawa Dynasty members, which was an extended family, started having issues with struggle for who becomes the king or who becomes the Mai. Under these two groups, there were two major families under the Saifawa Dynasty that were seriously battling for this political control. There was the Magumi, there was the Dawudu family, and there was also the Idrisu family. But in this quagmire, in this political tussle, the Bulala the Bulala issue came up. In this political troubles, the Bulala issue came up. The Bulala trace their origin to the Saifawa dynasty, but their origin, some historians believe that their origin was matrilineal. That one of the women born within the Saifawa dynasty that basically married outside the Saifawa dynasty gave birth to their lineage. Now the Bulala believe that with their Saifawa dynasty or the Saifawa lineage, they should be given the opportunity to at least be relevant in the political activities in the empire. But that was not to be. This made them to become aggressive against the Saifawa dynasty. For this reason, they had serious disagreement with the Saifawa dynasty and decided to pick up arms against the Saifawa dynasty members. They started with guerrilla attack on the armies loyal to the Saifawa dynasty. They started attacking the structures of the Saifawa dynasty, the capital of the Kanem part of the empire. The capital of the Kanem part of the empire was at Njimi. The sustained attack of the Bulala seriously weakened the influence and power of the Saifawa dynasty. Well, there were some other factors that actually affected the empire generally. There was the political tussle of a thing. There was issues with famine. There was issue with the vastness of the empire. The empire was so vast that it was difficult for the Saifawa dynasty to control. There was as well the issue with communication gap. It was difficult for the Saifawa dynasty to communicate to many parts of the empire. There were a lot of vassal states that took advantage of the weakness of the Saifawa dynasty leaders or rulers at that period to declare their independence. But the major problem that resulted into the collapse of the first phase of the empire was the attack or the continued attack of the Bulala. The Bulala sustained their attacks. The Bulala were responsible for the killing of some kings under the Saifawa dynasty. And when this attack continued, the influence and powers and the strength of the Saifawa dynasty diminished. When it got to a point that the Saifawa dynasty found it very difficult to defend themselves and they defend the capital, the whole thing became a huge problem. That under the reign of my Omar ibn Idris, who was from the Saifawa dynasty, he found out that he could not protect the capital. For this reason, himself and some of his family members, mainly the Saifawa dynasty members and some of their loyalists, fled Njimi. They ran away from Njimi and crossed over to the western part of what is known as Lake Chad. Lake Chad can be found in the West African sub-region, and some part of Lake Chad is also in the Central African region. Lake Chad region has some parts of present-day Nigeria and Chad, and then I think a little part of what is also known as Niger Republic. The flight of my Omar ibn Idris towards the western part of the Lake Chad signified the total collapse of the first Kanuri Empire, or the Kanem phase of the empire. The Kanem phase of the empire is as well referred to in history as the first Kanuri Empire. Now, with the first flight to the western part of Lake Chad, the Bulala did not just give up. The Bulala continued chasing the Saifawa dynasty, continued attacking them, and was also credited to have killed some kings in the place where they fled to. The Saifawa dynasty found other issues in this new area. Some locals that were present in this area they ran to did not just open their arms and welcome a king and his entourage that were running towards the territory. They started giving them problems. Well, the instability continued. The political tussle within the Saifawa Dynasty still continued in the new area or in the new place where they ran to. This political tussle, instability, insecurity continued until the enthronement or until the rise to the throne of my Gaji Ali, the rise to the throne of my Gaji Ali, or some may refer to him as my Ali Gaji. When my Gaji Ali came to the throne, he was able to defeat the Bulala. He defeated the Bulala, the same time was able to take off the internal squabble. He took off the internal squabble by killing the surviving members of the opposite family that were struggling with them within the Saifawa Dynasty. He conquered the Bulala, he defeated the Bulala, but did not attempt to go back to Njimi, where the capital of the first Kanem Empire or the Kanem phase of the empire was established. This was because the defeat of the Bulala did not reduce or completely establish their strength. But as a matter of fact, when they fled Njimi, the Bulala took over the control of that area and established some form of government. But the Bulala knew that the powers and influence of the Saifawa Dynasty were very strong and did not just fold their arms and claim that they've gotten a territory. That was the basic reason for them chasing down the Saifawa Dynasty with the intention of exterminating anything linked to the Saifawa Dynasty. After the reign of my Gaji Ali, another powerful king was my Idris Katagamabi. My Idris Katagamabi as well defeated the Bulala, but still did not attempt to establish or to attempt to take over the control of Njimi axis. The same thing was happened during the reign of the most powerful king that existed in the empire, both the first phase and the second phase. This king was my Idris Aloma. My Idris Aloma comfortably and effectively decimated the Bulala, reduced their striking influence to complete zero. When he became the king, he offered an olive branch to the Bulala, a kind of reconciliation and some level of understanding, but the Bulala rejected it. For this reason, he went after the Bulala, conquered them, and reduced them to very little influential capacity, but still did not move his territory to Njimi, although he was able to establish some level of control within the Njimi axis. Well, as a matter of fact, my Idris Aloma happened to be the strongest king to have existed in both phases of the empire. We've discussed his achievements in some of our presentations in the past. He was the first king to have introduced the use of firearm in the KanemBorno Empire, and he reigned in the second phase of the empire, which was the Borno phase of the empire. The Borno phase of the empire had its capital at Ngazagamo, and this capital was established by my Gaji Ali. Well, the tussle between the Saifawa Dynasty and the Bulala was very detrimental and brutal, which led to the collapse and as well resurgence. Please, if you are watching us for the very first time, please subscribe to our channel and click on the notification icon so that anytime we drop a new content or a new presentation, you will be notified. Thanks for being part of our channel.